now the Boston-based author, Christopher Castellani. He is a native of Delaware who holds degrees from Swarthmore and Tufts and Boston University. He's the artistic director of Grub Street, the much admired nonprofit creative writing center in Boston. He's also on the faculty at the Warren Wilson College MFA program for writers. He's written 3 critically acclaimed novels, The Saint of Lost Things, A Kiss from Madalena, and most recently, All This Talk of Love. As you might possibly conclude from his last name, he has a strong Italian heritage, which could explain in part why his novels look very closely and very perceptively at the lives of Italian Americans. In fact, a critic for the New York Times noted very cleverly, I think, that his books form something of an opera buffa of the immigrant experience. Certainly, his latest novel is suffused with drama and poignancy and intense emotions which could seem almost operatic in scope. But the novel also possesses an intimacy that captures telling and small moments in the lives of an Italian-American family torn between its generations, all laden with baggage. It is a compelling story he tells in the novel, and one that resonates with its firming detail and its universality. Please join me in welcoming Christopher Castellani.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Thank you all for being here. Can you hear me okay in the back? No. That's not good. If I do this, is that better? Yes, okay. All right. And I want to reiterate what was said earlier about the importance of these festivals, and I want to urge you all to support them. You don't know how valuable they are, how important they are, until they're gone. And so please support the festival, and please don't base your support on the perceived quality of my reading. That would be dangerous. So I'm really thrilled to be here and to read with Roland. It's going to be great. So I'm going to read from this novel. I'm going to read 2 sections from the very beginning and then a little later. And the thing you have to know about this book is that it's from 4 different perspectives in this family. You're in the father's head, you're in the mother's head, you're in the daughter's head, and you're in the son's head in discrete sections. The parents are immigrants, and the children who are grown are obviously first generation. And in each section, you're only in their heads, and I did that on purpose. But the only character who can break into a section and kind of take over the section is the mother. And if you have an Italian mother, or you are an Italian mother, or you are a mother in general, you understand that. And so this first section is from the son Frankie's perspective, mostly. The one thing that comes up, everybody asks me what the word Jeremiad means. It's in the first paragraph, and it's a long complaint. So this is from the beginning. The chapter is called La Familia Grasso. Frankie Grasso and his mother watch the same soap, but they root for different women. He likes the deranged ones, the pregnancy fakers, the poisoners, the tramps. They are necessary research for his chapter on the legacy of the Gothic and the construction of female identity. His mother favors the patient, dutiful wives, they of the shellacked hair and pantsuits and unshakable faith, and looks to them as examples of proper behavior in 1990s America. Frankie shouldn't be surprised. His mother's life has been a Jeremiad in 2 languages and 2 countries, and her 72 years have taught her to distrust romantic passion. Precious minutes on the phone with Frankie she spends wishing doom on the amoral women of daytime, shocked that some network executive has allowed them to stray so far from decency in the middle of the afternoon. In life, she says tonight, after Frankie praises the pregnancy faker for her resourcefulness in finding her long-lost identical twin sister and persuading her to carry the baby she can't admit she lost, you have the truth or you have nothing. And what he wants to tell her is, by that formulation, not a single member of the Grasso family, not to mention anyone he knows, has a blessed thing. Instead, he says, I'm exhausted. I've been working all night on this chapter. My phone bill's 10 pages long. Wait until she has that baby, then we'll see. I call you back right now, she says. I have the money. Daddy put me on a plan, 10 cents a minute. If you can call your cousin in Avezzano twice a week, I tell him I can call Boston for a few dimes. I need sleep, Frankie says. Then, all right, call me back. He hangs up and takes a sip of whiskey. The light comes on in the window of his neighbor's house, an identical triple-decker but better maintained. Recently, in his German immersion course, Frankie invented the adjective zusammengetrankt, or thrown together crowdedly, to describe his neighborhood. He loves his word, which looks and sounds like the claustrophobia it conveys and connotes the grime and desperation of those thickly settled towns that surround and choke a city. This is your home now, his mother said the one time she visited. She stood on his crumbling front stoop with her arms outstretched, facing the vista of chain-link fences and vinyl siding. It's ugly, but it's yours. You'll never want to leave. It's only a 6-hour drive, he said. I'll be back all the time. Instead, they settle for Frankie's nightly phone call at 11:01, no matter where he is in the world, one of their many promises to each other. Frankie's friends call their parents once a month and fly home twice a year, less often if they can swing it. Like him, they toil in obscurity in the service of literary scholarship. They have advanced degrees and drug habits and a love affair with irony. Unlike him, the toil, or is it the obscurity, has soured them on distractions like family and authentic human connection. You really talk to your mother every single night? They ask him. How? Why? Because she's alive, he says. But what do you talk about? I haven't spoken an honest word to my mother since kindergarten. Who said anything about honesty? He lets the phone ring 5 or 6 times, imagining his mother on the other end staring into the receiver. When he finally picks up, she says, "What's wrong with you?" And though he thinks of 3 things off the bat, he treats the question as rhetorical and lets her talk. Maddalena Grasso switches the phone to her left ear and again takes up her husband's pants, which she has been hemming off and on for hours. She's been on the phone since 8 o'clock. First with her daughter, then her friend Arlene from the dance studio, then Sister Mary asking another favor for the church, then a wrong number with a friendly voice, and now, finally, always finally, her Frankie. Your sister was here this afternoon, she says. You should have seen. She had my old sweatsuit on, the pink one with the rhinestones on the cuffs your tia Ida gave me 30 years ago. She's like a hurricane, your sister, never any time to sit and have a conversation. She ate a bowl of soup and some pasta left over, standing in front of the sink the whole time like a peasant. I said, sit down 1 second. It's not good always to rush. But she has no time. She's going to call you this week, she said. She's going to tell you she and Tom got that plot, the one with the water. They had the meeting with the builder, and they got it. The lot, you mean, says Frankie, not the plot. Lot, plot, whatever. And you know the land next to it. You saw it last time. It doesn't have any water, but it has those tall trees like you like. It's an acre almost for sale, and I was thinking, Daddy too, how beautiful it would be for you to live next door to your sister, and you won't have to throw away your money on rent anymore. Who's got that kind of cash, Frankie says, though if he doesn't shut her down now, she'll offer at least a down payment, a cut of the money she and his father have been saving in his name since the night of his conception, a night she's told him about in more detail than was necessary. For a moment, Frankie allows himself to imagine the unimaginable, he and his girlfriend, Professor Birch, clearing the brush from their little strip of yard, she in her tank top and hairy armpits and army-issue boots, waving to his sister and brother-in-law from across a koi pond. Professor Birch is not the type for big Sunday dinners cooked and served and cleared by women, for shared acreage, for lawn care. She is the type who phones her husband while Frankie's inside her to remind him to mail the insurance bill. Who makes Frankie call her professor even when she's naked and sullied and rummaging under his bed for her socks. She is exactly the type of woman his mother was afraid he'd meet in the big city. With or without Professor Birch, Frankie has no plans to move back to the suburbs of Wilmington, a fact he can never admit to the woman at the other end of the line. He has been called to a bigger and deeper life, far from the narrow bed in which he was planted. And yet it is a stipulation of his unspoken contract with his parents that he treat this stint as a graduate student in Boston as temporary, a regrettable but necessary period of time away from home that will allow him to return in triumph as a doctor of philosophy and English literature, secure a highly paid professorship at the university, marry a sweet Italian girl, and start a family like his sister did and his older brother would have done had he lived. When Frankie is quiet for too long, Maddalena worries. He is jealous of his sister and brother-in-law and all their money. He is falling in love with Boston and will never come home. He is too young and confused to think about plots. Let him be, she thinks, but how impossible that is. So she tells him her stories over and over again in different words, but with the same lesson at the end of them, stories about how it was for her to be brought to America from her village across the ocean like a piece of furniture, in love with one man, but married to another, a stranger, and just a teenager she was, without a word of the language, and none of it by choice. Not at all like for Frankie, who left his mother in Wilmington 4 years ago, not for love or money or a better life, but for school. As easy as you'd leave a movie if it wasn't making you laugh. You know, Prima saved you a place at the table for the confirmation. She says she has to tell the catering how many people. Every person who doesn't show up, she still has to pay $45. I told her I wasn't coming, Frankie says. You should come, she says, to respect your sister, not because you want to or don't want to. To be honest, I'm disappointed Patrick's getting confirmed at all, Frankie says. I had high hopes for him when he became a Buddhist and gave away his stereo. Don't even mention that, his mother says. He's normal again now, and I've never seen your sister more happy. She takes a pin from between her lips. You know, you can bring somebody if you want. I pay for the train for both of you. Prima put you down for 2 just in case. I don't need train money. $45 a person, she repeats, and that's without open bar. Can you imagine? And if you don't belong to the country club, you can pay $100 a person, and still they don't let you have the party there. She lets that sink in, for Frankie, though elegant things have never impressed him. Maddalena held all 3 of her children's first communions at the Aldila, the Grasso family restaurant, where there was home cooking and plastic red tablecloths and white crepe paper hanging from the walls. First the party for Prima, the first child, her daughter, the angel. Then for Tony, the first son, born in the new country. Then, 17 years after him, for Frankie, who saved her. Every night when the phone rings and he's there to say, "Hey, Mom, what's up?" he saves her again. Frankie rubs his eyes. Even if Professor Birch could ditch her husband, he knows exactly what they do at this silly fete: chug free cocktails, gorge on the buffet, and spend the rest of the time on the lobby couch, sneering at Prima and Tom's unexamined embrace of Catholicism. Worse, Prima's already called to inform him that the confirmation isn't all the Grassos will be celebrating. She has some big announcement, one of her famous surprises, one she wants Frankie to hear in person because it will affect the entire family. She offered no more details, convinced he'd blab to their mother. Turns out I have to present a paper that weekend, he says to Maddalena. Not that anyone ever asks me about my schedule. It's kind of a big deal, actually. They just tell you now? The university's not very organized. Harvard, what do you expect? Harvard? Yes, Harvard. Does that make it all right? I can miss the formal induction of my innocent nephew into the racist, sexist, xenophobic institution known as the Roman Catholic Church if I'm speaking at Harvard? Do they pay you? Something like this you don't do for money, he says. You do it for the prestige. The truth, of course, is that there is no paper and no invitation from Harvard, which won't even let Frankie into its fortress of a library, let alone the Millennium Reproaches, Anxiety, and Authorship in the Fin de Siècle Conference. There is certainly no prestige. Despite employing some well-connected and widely published professors, Dr. Birch among them, Frankie's graduate school is solidly second tier, and Frankie himself is passionately meeting, but not far exceeding, its modest expectations. Upon earning their PhDs, he and his classmates can expect not tenure-track positions at coastal universities or the Seven Sisters, but if they're very lucky, comp and ret jobs at mega state schools in Des Moines or Tallahassee or some other regional airport city. As far as Frankie knows, he is the only one sleeping with a professor, an advantage he counts as distinct in the job market. Your sister will be devastating, his mother says, but school is more important. I'm sorry, Frankie says, I really am. The semester strung me out. I'm not myself. Tell everybody I feel terrible. Do what you have to do, Madalena says. That's why you're up there. Work hard, stay straight, drink some whiskey. It helps you sleep. Excellent idea, he says. Good night, she says. I love you. Love you too, Ma. Good night. Good night, Frankie, she says. I love you. I love you. It's important to her to say the words until she's sure he's hung up. Bye, Ma, Frankie says. I love you. Bye. It's important to him to say the words until he's sure she's hung up. And once again, she has spared him. This time, as so many before. How easy life can be, Frankie thinks, when your mother knows so little of the world and you are not her favorite son. I'm going to skip ahead to this party, and it's the party thrown by the sister, Prima, and this is from her perspective. And the main thing you need to know in between this is that we find out that the older brother, Frankie's older brother, Prima's younger brother, died at 15 from suicide. So this is at the party. Prima's been buzzing around, getting the party ready at the country club. Excuse me, someone says behind her. You must be the mother of the bride? She turns and, no mistake this time, there's Frankie. Frankie in a wrinkled shirt, no tie, and khakis with frayed cuffs. Frankie, after all. For her first instinct is to throw her arms around him, but she stops herself. He's 2 hours late. The look in his eyes is smug. She checks her watch. How'd you get here? She says. You couldn't have called? I drove, he says. I got up at the crack of dawn and sat in traffic all day. That's why I'm late, but maybe I shouldn't have bothered. Prima has steeled herself to fight her mother today, but not Frankie. So she says, you know what? You're right. And apologizes, thanks him for making the effort to drive all the way down, and offers him gas money, which he refuses. Finally, she throws her arms around him like she wanted to when she saw him. He is her only brother. She's happy he's here, even 2 hours late, even smug. Did I miss the big announcement, he asks. You're in luck, she says. She takes him by the hand and leads him to the head table. When they reach the dance floor, their mother spots him. It occurs to Prima at this moment, as Madalena jumps out of her chair and runs to greet her son, that all Frankie needs to do to fill his mother's heart is walk into a room. There are tears in her eyes like he's a soldier stepping off a warship. She's seen him as recently as the 4th of July, but it might as well have been a decade. When you have lost one of your own children, every day apart from the ones who survived seems endless. Prima lets go of her brother's hand, steps to the side as their mother embraces him and searches the room for other early departures to bid goodnight. Before long, the guests have all gone, taking with them the heavy glass vases of orange dahlias, the cake and wax paper bags. Prima and Tom stand at the head table, her arm around his waist, her head on his shoulder. Their family sits before them, her mother and father, 3 of their boys, Frankie eating a warmed-up plate of lasagna. It is 6 o'clock, nearly dark, and through the windows they can see the last of the golfers carrying their gear to the parking lot. Oh well, says her mother, rubbing her arms and standing. They're going to kick us out, I guess. Hold on a second, says Tom. Antonio puts his hand on his wife's leg. What's your rush, he says. Ryan, shirt untucked, returns from the men's room, glances around at his parents and brothers and grandparents and uncle all sitting quietly. What'd I miss, he asks. Your mother has something to say, Tom tells him. Oh, right, says Ryan, the big finale. The folded papers in Prima's hands suddenly take on a weight. For weeks, she's been eager to hand them to the 7 people gathered around the table, but now, inexplicably, she wants to keep them to herself a bit longer. Can I guess? Asks Matt. Sure. Really? Okay, hold on, let me think. You're buying a boat, Madalena guesses. She's sitting up straight in her chair, ready to be proud of whatever her daughter can afford. Nope, Tom says, but that's not a bad idea. You bought both those plots in Greenville, Madalena guesses again, so me and your father can live with you. Colder, says Tom. We're selling that lot for a nice little profit, by the way. This news involves all of us, Prima says. Maddalena narrows her eyes. Why does that make me nervous? She says. Don't tell me you're moving somewhere far. You can't go chasing your kids everywhere. No, of course not, says Prima, but actually yes, temporarily we're all moving. Far, far away. She takes a deep breath, locks eyes with her mother. We're going back to the old country, all of us, to the Grasso's ancestral village, Santa Cecilia, where it all began, for 2 weeks. Awesome, says Matt. Talk serious, Maddalena says. I'm very serious, Prima says. It's not difficult. I buy the tickets, I call a few relatives, we get on a plane. I'm there, says Ryan. Oh yes, it's very easy, Maddalena says. Everyone's looking at her. She shakes her head, folds her arms more tightly across her chest, the way Patrick used to when he wouldn't eat his peas. You knew about this, Frankie? Frankie shakes his head. I didn't think so. It's like a resort now, says Tom gently. There are 5 or 6 hotels right smack in the middle of Santa Cecilia, and even if there weren't, there's so much to see in Italy. Prima's mapped out a bunch of day trips. We want the family to learn its history. I know my history, Maddalena says. So does he. She ticks her head toward Antonio. I don't tell you enough times, I'll never go back there. You call it a gift to force me. You weren't kidding, Tom says to Prima under his breath. I knew you wouldn't be thrilled, Prima says to her mother, but this isn't only about you. There are other people at the table here today. Do you ever think about what Dad wants? How about your grandsons, us? Do you know how embarrassed I get every time I tell somebody I've never been to my homeland? Embarrassed, says Frankie, again with a smug face. She's got such a sad life, doesn't she, Frankie? Maddalena says. She wants to go to Italy so bad, why doesn't she just go herself? She's got the money. I'm still here, Ma, Prima says. Nobody's stopping you, Prima. I tell your father all the time, let your daughter take you back. Don't drag me into it. You just heard her say that, Prima. Sorry, you haven't heard her say that, Prima, mutters Frankie. Did you two just meet? Prima shakes her head at her brother. I've heard it, she says. I live here. I know her better than anybody. Without her in Italy, though, it won't be the same. And what, she's supposed to stay here by herself? I don't have to go, Frankie says. Let me say one thing, Antonio says. He leans back in his chair, presses his fingertips to the edge of the table. This is the best idea I've ever heard. Finally, Tom says, somebody likes it. There's only one mistake you made, Antonio continues. No way in the world you're spending all that money on us. I'm paying the tickets for everybody. Save your breath, Dad, says Prima, because, and hear me on this, it's already done. She waves the folded envelopes at them. Right here, 8 prepaid travel vouchers, non-refundable, departure date August 10th, 2000, return date August 25th. No shit, says Patrick. I told you I was serious. But Frankie has school, Antonio says. In August, Prima answers, even Frankie doesn't go to school in August. The details we can work out as we go forward, but for now we're all going to clear our schedules for August 10th. That's 10 months away, plenty of time to plan, cover the restaurant, knock some sense into you, Mom, whatever we need to do. All that money wasted, says Maddalena. She takes her fork and pushes a bite of cake around the plate. It's a shame. I'm staying here. Call the airplane company. Tell them I died. Jesus Christ, Prima says. This is supposed to be exciting, says Tom. Prima and I have been wanting to make this happen for years, not just for us, for everybody. Since the day we met, we've been talking about a Grasso-Buckley family trip to Italy. Doesn't it sound like a movie? Good news is long overdue in this family, says Prima. That's all we're trying to do, give the Grassos a happy memory. Maddalena stops listening to this nonsense. Why bother? They speak for her. Always people speak for her, tell her what she really means, how to pronounce the words so they sound not only like correct English, but less angry, less sad. First her mother and father spoke for her, then Antonio Grasso came along in his suit and his Seal's car and did the talking. She has never been back to Santa Cecilia, not even for a visit, not once in 50 years, and she's not about to start now. Unlike Antonio, she still has her people in that village. She remembers them how they were when she left them in 1946. Now most of them are bones in the ground behind the church. Too much family to lose in one lifetime. It's not enough to bury her own son. Now they want her to go back for the bones of the others too. She has only one brother left, Claudio, and one sister, Carolina, but she hasn't spoken to them in 20 years. She won't see them, old and sick, not after working so hard every day to keep them young and beautiful and full of life in her mind. She could be loud about it now, but she won't. Not here, not on her grandson's special day, not with Frankie beside her. If she makes a fuss, she'll scare him off. So she pushes the slice of cake around her plate until it hardens to a paste. Her eyes wander the room. She notices the spill stains on the carpets by the bathroom, the chips in the saucers, the dust on the drapes. In the corners of Prima's eyes, look how she's talking now, on and on, her and her surprises, are a web of wrinkles, and not just when she smiles. Liver spots cover her once perfect wrists. No, that's Madalena's own face in the mirrored wall. That's her spotted, wrinkled, old lady skin. Santa Cecilia was the one place on earth where she was young. She was a beauty and a talker there, an expert at voices, an actress in the making. What belongs to her and her alone is that village during those years, her memories of it, of who she might have been, her view from the view from the terrace above her father's store, the stairs to her bedroom made of marble, the tops of the trees scraping the sky. Go back now, see it all changed, and that too will be taken away. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chris. Great job. The second of our two terrific writers today is Roland Merullo, who comes to us all the way from Massachusetts, although he has lived for a time in Vermont. He has created a strong and distinguished body of work that includes 16 books, from novels to stories to nonfiction to memoir. He was born in Boston. He was raised in a town. Let me give you a quiz here, just a short quiz. Can you guess what town he was raised in from the three titles of books of his I'm going to give you? In Revere, Revere Beach Boulevard, and Revere Beach Elegy. Yeah, if you don't get that, you probably are qualified for a job in Congress. He also served in the Peace Corps, and he worked for the United States Information Agency. He published his first book, Leaving Los Alpes, in 1991, and now he is an award-winning writer who joins us with two recently published books. One is The Talk Funny Girl, a compelling novel about a remarkable young New Hampshire girl whose courage and resilience helps her overcome a community of abuse. Also, the novel Lunch with Buddha, a sequel to his popular Breakfast with Buddha. It's all about a road trip through the American Northwest, which becomes a moving interior exploration of values and life's meaning. Please welcome Roland Merullo.
Hear me okay back there? On the way back? Yes, no. Go like this if you can hear me okay. All right. Thanks, Bill, for the nice intro. It's an honor to be here. The lower? All right, thank you, Bill, for the nice intro. It's an honor to be here, especially with Chris, a person I like and admire. I thought it was a beautiful reading. And I think the Grub Street work you've done is amazing. It's amazing to me that I've never in my life wished I was shorter, but now I do. That Avezzano is going to be mentioned in both these readings, and we didn't plan it that way. So I'm going to read a little bit about a disastrous trip to Italy that I took with my mother, who's now 91, so then she was about 81. My wife, Amanda, long-suffering. My two girls, Alexandra and Juliana, who were 5 and 1.5 at the time. And we've been to Italy a bunch of times, and this was the only bad trip we had, but it was real bad. It was so bad that the only way I could psychologically deal with it was to come home and write something funny about it, which I tried to do. It was my fault. I wanted to get out of the New England winter. I thought Italy would be warm. I rented a house in the mountains near Rieti, which is like an hour and a half north of Rome, which is not warm, at least in February. We were there one night, the house was freezing cold. Juliana started to throw up, threw up for the next 7 days. Went to the emergency room in Rome, got lost. It was just one awful thing after another. And I feel a very strong responsibility, I think like most fathers and mothers do, to make my children happy. So I decided I was going to abandon the rental that we had for 3 weeks and go to Lecce. If you know Italian geography, Lecce is like 600 miles south of Contigliano, which was the little town we were in. And so this is the story of the first day of that ride when I caught the flu that Juliana had. And you're perfectly welcome to laugh at our misfortunes. The names that won't be familiar is when we lived in this little village which was called Contigliano, the woman who lived in the next house, her name was Agnese. She was a very sweet woman. And her husband was Mimo, who was anti-sweet, and he was like the caretaker of the house, a very grumpy son of a gun. And the only other thing is we were driving a car called a Kangoo, which should tell you something. And you probably know what an agriturismo is. It's like a country inn where they serve great food in Italy. We head south. One last drive through Contigliano, one last trip across the pretty plain and through the outskirts of Rieti. This time, as if the curse has been lifted, we find the road we are looking for, because when we took Juliana to the hospital, we couldn't find that road. We find the road we are looking for toward a place called Avezzano without any trouble, and begin the scenic drive down Italy's spine with the snowy 4,000, 5,000, and 7,000 foot mountains for company. Somewhere in the first part of that drive, I say to Amanda, I'm feeling a little fluish. Me too, she says. My stomach isn't right. Maybe it was the eggs Agnese gave us. Maybe, I say. As far as Avezzano on State Highway 578, we encounter no problems, though I'm feeling worse by the mile and stop twice. The first time for a breath of air, and the second for a dose of ibuprofen. In the back seat, my mother is teaching Alexandra a card game called Snap. I do not know how this game is played. I know only that when someone puts down a certain card, she has to yell out, "Snap!" at top volume and slap the back of her grandmother's hand. I had 3 hours of sleep last night. With each beautiful mountainous mile, it is becoming clearer that what I am feeling has nothing to do with Agnese's fresh eggs, which Amanda scrambled for breakfast. No, the bitter truth is that I'm sinking into the influenza muck that Juliana is climbing out of. I remember that on our first evening in the house, we mistakenly took our drinking water right from the faucet, and only later found out it wasn't potable. Snap. The road winds. Snap. Juliana stirs, coughs, in a way I don't like, as if she's going to vomit again. Amanda takes off her seatbelt and turns around to look at her, but she goes back to sleep. We find Avezzano with no trouble, and then somehow, despite the fact that Mimo, who drove a truck on these roads for 30 years, advised us that the best route to Lecce was the autostrada from Avezzano to the Adriatic coast, Amanda and I decide on a different, more inland road that continues down through the mountains. I have no explanation for this, no defense. We have a lot of traveling experience, we've read a lot of maps, we're not stupid or especially proud people. According to our map, it just looked like the better way to go. That's all I can say. We head off toward Benevento, planning to spend the night there at an excellent agriturismo that exists in my imagination. But south of Avezzano on glorious Highway 17, things go very bad very quickly. I have promised the passengers that we will stop in the first good-sized town we see and have lunch there. But there is no good-sized town after Avezzano, unless you count Sulmona, which for reasons lost to me now, we don't like. I am feeling worse and worse, some kind of pressure in the head, an awful buzzing sourness in my belly. Juliana is awake and crying. Alexandra yells, "Snap!" We wind through the old gray mountains of the province of Abruzzo, and at last come upon a good-sized town that meets our aesthetic standards. Testa dell'Abruzzo. Lunch coming up, I say, through the miserable fog of my illness. The cheerful dad. Lunch coming up. Yay, yay, lunch! Testa dell'Abruzzo is a moderately attractive town set tight on a hillside with forested mountain slopes in all directions. The streets are straight for only a few meters at a stretch. The stone houses stand in orderly curving rows, and it is clearly the type of place that draws a lot of tourists and abounds in good trattoria. Just after we come into town, the main road snakes around a corner between houses so close on either side we feel we can reach right in through someone's window and steal a loaf of bread. Beyond the first corner, the narrow road winds a bit more and then suddenly leads out into the mountain wilderness again. There has to be a restaurant in that town, I say. We must have missed it. People there have to eat. I let the carabinieri behind us go past, then once the police car is out of sight, make an illegal U-turn on the tight road. We glide back down the hill into Testa dell'Abruzzo. A man is working in his garage there, cutting wood, door open. I stop and ask about restaurants qui vicino, half expecting him to look at the children and my mother, ask us where we're from, and invite us upstairs for home-cooked pasta. But that's a scene from another dream. There is a restaurant just around this corner, he says, unsmiling, all business, focused on the boards at hand, but there's no place to leave your car. Can we leave it here? I ask him. He pauses half a beat and says, no. So we go around the hairpin corner again and see just where the amicable woodcutter said they would be signs for a trattoria. And just as he said, there is no place to park anywhere in the vicinity. We drive slowly on. Half a mile further down the road is a bar with a 3-car parking area in front and some disaffected youth hanging out there on the stone steps of a church. Why are they smoking, Dad? Alexandra wants to know. I think because there is no hope of eating. The bar itself is presided over by a kind, plump woman who leans down, smiles at the girls, and happily points the way to the bathrooms. We ask if it would be possible to get a dish of pasta, but she says no, sfortunatamente, only drinks, brioches, and candy bars. I want something more substantial for my girls and my mother, but it seems that I am in one of those streaks where every decision is the wrong one. This happens to me sometimes, even at home. I'll cruise along beautifully for days, writing the sentences I want to write, putting the kids to bed with just the right words, having one fruitful conversation after the next with my agent, my editor, picking the 4-iron instead of the 5-iron out of the bag to stroke my Titleist up onto the green, and then it will all go sour, all of it, all at once, in an unbelievable cascade of failed judgment and foolishness and pure rotten luck. For me, because of some misalignment of the stars or some odd past life karma, the good and the bad come bunched together in long stretches. On the day my first novel was accepted, after 12 years of writing, I came home to a letter from the Massachusetts State Lottery Commission telling me I had won $400 on my season ticket. On the day my father died, unexpectedly, I was immersed in a house painting project so poorly estimated that I was halfway through 6 weeks of working for nothing. The bad stretches are as unnerving as the good stretches are exhilarating. For the past few days now, I've been thinking about this, a bruised, scratched-up man standing waist-deep in heavy surf, watching the next enormous wave roll in. I asked the woman behind the little bar in Testa dell'Abruzzo what the other options for lunch might be. And she tells us about a restaurant half a mile back at the corner. But no place to park, I say. Right. Could we leave our car out front here and walk? The police will come by, she says, give you a ticket. How much would the ticket be, I say. She says 60 euros. And it is testimony to the state of my health, mental and physical, that I stand there for a few seconds wondering whether or not it's worth it. 60 euros, 70 bucks, let's see. Outside, the disaffected youth are focusing all their intermittent and wandering attention upon us, this naive-looking family of 5 with a fully packed car. My laptop rests conspicuously in the back window of the Kangoo, golf clubs beside it. Altogether, it's a few $1,000s worth of merchandise, enough to keep them in cigarettes and nose rings for years. Let's drive on, I say. There's bound to be a restaurant along the highway. No one objects, so we load ourselves back into the car, Ma in the middle, the girls to either side, well strapped in, Amanda beneath a pile of maps, diapers, crackers, sippy cups, notepads, plastic earrings, crayons, and tissues in the passenger seat, and me behind the wheel. We wind the way through the Abruzzen hills, this cold, rugged terrain to which so many Italian-American families can trace their roots. 100 years ago, before the wars, before Mussolini, before a complicated amalgam of foreign aid and social, political, and economic changes brought southern Italy into the modern world, the mountain towns of Abruzzo offered little or nothing in the way of upward mobility. Poor, bleak, disease-ridden, presided over by corrupt officials and choked by a rigid caste system, this land was the perfect breeding ground for a dream called America. What strong, smart, ambitious young man or woman, hearing the claims of gold and milk and honey, dreaming dreams of freedom and equality, would not have been tempted to pack up a few belongings, ride a horse-drawn car to Naples, and book passage for the land of opportunity? It occurs to me that I am the inheritor of those kinds of inflated dreams, only in reverse. It's not gold I think about when I think about this land across the ocean, but warmth, unadulterated food, beautiful churches, and sublime works of art, a slow-paced, family-oriented way of living. It's not property and kin I've abandoned in search of those dreams, only a cold house and a stack of bills, but there is a link, I can feel it. Some kind of genetic predisposition to the pursuit of a better life. Not far outside Testa dell'Abruzzo, we see a sign for a restaurant, the familiar crossed knife and fork, and the word ristorante, unmistakable beneath it. The sign instructs us to take the next right turn. We do that and find ourselves with the highway at our back and a do not enter sign in front of us. There are no other roads. The options are back up into the right-hand lane of the highway or go forward against the flow of traffic. We back up onto the highway, retrace our route, take the right turn again, thinking we must have missed something, and there in front of us, clear as day, is do not enter. We drive on. By this point, it would be difficult to exaggerate how bad I am feeling. Ugly little chills run up and down the skin of my arms and back like writhing snakes. Quick fevers come and go, and an awful, a sickening, a terrible sourness thrums in my belly and throat. You feeling bad? I say to Amanda. I was, she says. It passed. Feeling okay, Mom? I ask over my shoulder. My stomach was a little upset, but it's better now. You guys hungry back there? Yeah. Another 2 miles down the highway, and we see a second ristorante sign. This one points us left, and full of hope, we climb a short, steep driveway toward what appears to be a small hotel. It is 1:30, exactly the middle of the Italian lunch hour, perfect timing. But when we crest the hill at the top of the drive, we see that the windows of the hotel are boarded up, the small parking lot strewn with glass and litter. Maybe drive around back, says my wonderful wife. Queen of optimism. To please her, I drive around behind the obviously abandoned place, then make a U-turn, muttering, sinking, and head back down to the road. I'm real hungry, Dad, Alexandra says from the back seat. On the highway again, we see graffiti spray painted on the abutment of an overpass. God is. Another 10 miles, another small town. We take the exit and climb. I suppose that in better moments this would be a pretty place. An old fortified medieval town high above a tributary of the Sangro River with the mountains close in on all sides. But I am truly sick now and in the foulest of moods. Amanda directs me up a steep, impossibly narrow alleyway as if squeezing the Kangoo between those stone facades is the simplest thing in the world. And I snap at her. There are a couple of inches clearance beyond the right and left mirrors. The alley makes a sharp left. I have to go back and forth several times to negotiate the corner. By this point, Juliana is screaming, "Up, up, up on mommy." I feel very much like vomiting. We crest the hill and the road opens into a small town square with an old church above us and a view of the river a few hundred feet below. Not a restaurant to be seen. Needing a moment by myself and a breath or two of air, I get out, walk over to the railing, and wonder which would be the better plan. Throw myself off now, or wait, find a place for lunch, have one last good meal, and then throw myself off. This is all true, by the way. I see a man, a very tiny man, walking past, and ask him about the chances of finding a place to eat in this town. He is most helpful. He leans his small body in toward me, looks at me out of the tops of his eyes, and his face is shining with goodwill. He talks very slowly and deliberately, wanting me to get it right. And I have a sinful urge to lift him off his feet and fling him over the railing, also true, down 300 feet into the tributary of the river of blood. I am not a violent man, not at all, but I have a terrible vision of myself picking him up and throwing him. There is a restaurant close by. He gestures for some reason at the church, but it's closed. There is another one. He gestures off in the other direction down the hill, but I think they only serve dinner. You might try it. A friend of his is walking by. I am staring down toward the river in a hypnosis of malaise. I spit. The small man stays close to me, asks his friend about a third restaurant, and this man too comes up helpfully, looks at me, and says happily, "Cuso." Closed. I turn and stare at the faces of the people I love, pressed against the glass of the Kangoo, keeping me on this earth, keeping me out of an Italian prison. At this point, a third man walks up, my size, a bit larger, leans in close and says, "Are you from France?" I want to throw them all over. Every one of them, large and small, then jump over after them. A fourth man walks past. My little pal calls out to him about helping this hungry family from America find some lunch. Feeding the Merullos has become a community project. "Try the locanda," he calls back. No, the locanda's not open, fool." "Sure it is, I just walked by there." "Try the locanda then," the little man says, turning his face up to me again, helpfully, eagerly, kindly, and he gives me complicated directions I half listen to. On the way to the locanda we get lost, of course, but not very lost. Dogs greet us outside, possibly the same dogs we made friends with at the house in Contigliano. They have followed us down Highway 17, wanting another shot at the tires of the stalled Kangoo. Inside the locanda, it is very cold, and the owner is not friendly, his food not good. It is not a surprise to me that we are the only customers. Juliana eats nothing. My mother wraps herself in her coat and eventually sits on the upright radiator until the man rudely tells her not to. She might break it. It's only made of steel, after all, and she's 110 pounds. I cannot report what Amanda does because by this point we are not really making eye contact. It is my fault, all my fault, completely my fault, and I am certainly doing penance. I have a few bites of gnocchi with some broccoletta mixed in, and immediately feel I'm going to throw it up all over the locanda's cold tile floor and fragile radiators. I summon all my willpower. Must go on. We pay. In our never-ending attempts to improve our language skills, we ask the owner what locanda means. Money in his hand, he is slightly less unfriendly, and after struggling a bit, gives us to understand that the word means something like inn. We leave the inn. We must go on. Outside, the pack of mongrels, pests, circles, jumps up on the girls, yaps and yips. Alexandra shrieks. I shoo them off. They are dealing with the wrong man at the wrong time. One scratch, one bit of broken skin on either one of my girls, and I will slaughter the pesky canines there in the town square, slaughter them, skewer them, cook them, and bring them over to the locanda to be served as the evening special. Foul, foul, foul mood. Juliana has had another terrible diarrhea, so Amanda and I change her in the cold wind on a park bench, with the dogs unflappable, unafraid, unaware that they are about to be slaughtered, sniffing and prancing between our ankles. Then we load ourselves back into the Kangoo and head toward the highway. But the road that led up from the highway somehow does not lead back to the highway. Painful to remember. We wander a maze of streets, then stop and try to get our bearings. Far above us, cutting across the high hillsides, is a winding interstate perched precariously on 100-foot tall concrete stilts. My mother doesn't like heights at all. She says, well, I'm glad we're not going that way at least. We see a woman and her daughter approaching, and I ask them how to get to the road to East Avenue. They point up to the highway on stilts. Sorry, Mom, I say over my shoulder. We find the exit from the town and climb, crossing wind-swept stretches of highway perched 1,000 feet above one of Abruzzo's stony valleys. Buffeted by the strong gusts, the trucks in front of us waver and tilt. Something is wrong. I smell something I shouldn't be smelling. For a few miles, I wonder if one of the trucks is burning oil, or if what I'm smelling is the clutch of the Kangoo, truly destroyed now, in which case we will have to glide down out of the mountains on this road on stilts. In the wind, the Kangoo half out of control, the trucks tilting, the girls screaming, the man behind the wheel wrapped in a desperate struggle with nausea, in an evil mood. Something smells very strongly and very badly. I wonder if Juliana might need another diaper change so soon. But no, this is something else. In a very strained version of the happy dad voice, I say, check your shoes, everybody. Everybody checks their shoes. We have reached the summit of this mountain range now and are overlooking the city of Castel di Sangro. The smell has grown stronger. With all but one of the precincts reporting that there are no bottom-of-the-shoe problems. High up on a windswept rise, I pull over into a turnoff that is strewn with every imaginable size, shape, and type of paper, plastic, and metal litter. I check my boots. I curse. I step out cursing in the cold wind, find a small piece of plastic, and go to work. These are new boots bought specially for this trip. Their hard soles have countless little channels in them. Deep but narrow channels meant to give traction on snowy driveways and muddy hiking trails, but filled now with the fresh droppings of one or more of the Abruzzo's friendly dogs. I hear noises from the car through the windows. These are not good noises. Trucks rumble past a few feet away. My back hurts. I have the flu now, surely. I am working away at my odious task with a piece of plastic and some paper. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's an impossible job. The new hiking boots will have to be soaked in bleach, soaked in acid, thrown out. I toss the paper aside into the pile of litter. The passengers are restless, the boots only half clean. I scuff them furiously in the dust and gravel, furiously. Toss the plastic into the wind and climb back in behind the wheel. It's a sign from God, I say, not very nicely. It's some kind of curse. What is, Dad? Alexandra asks. And I say, nothing, honey, and go on. Thank you.
The theme is don't go to Italy.
It's funny how they overlapped. I mean, we didn't plan that.
Not at all. I just have to say, my family is from a village between Rieti and Avezzano. So in that, it's amazing. And it's not just Italy, but that very small, kernel of Italy that we're talking about. Anyway.
So this is a Q&A sector for the next 15 minutes, I guess, right? So either one of us, you can ask questions.
Did you get there?
Yeah, there's a whole book. This is a whole book, and it's serialized in my newsletter that my publisher sends out every month. And it's we eventually got to Lecce, where Alexandra fell out of the bed and smashed her head. I had the flu for a week. I finally recovered, played in a golf tournament with my mother, decided to abandon Italy and drive home, and drive back up to the airport in Milan, which was another 700 miles. My wife got a piece of metal in her eye, got infected. Juliana got a urinary infection. She had 104 temperature at 3 o'clock in the morning, 30 miles from the nearest hospital, and on and on and on. And at the very end of the book, I turned to my mother. When we finally got back to America, I said, Mom, next time, Florida.
First, Roland. In the Talk Funny Girl, I found it interesting that a man, not from northern New Hampshire, could find the voice of that teenage girl. And how surprised I was, sometimes disappointed that she made certain choices, but how right they were based on who she was.
I've had that asked of me a lot, and I don't really know the answer, except I have 2 daughters, but I don't think that's it. I think the place I try to go when I write the more serious material is deep into a person and deep into myself, and I think at that level, superficial things like race and gender and age really don't matter as much. I think we're all really very much alike at that level. And so I tried to go there with Marjorie and just see her as a person. And I also tried to avoid what I think is a mistake that some men make when they write about women, talking about, certain particular things that they think will make them sound like they know what it's like to be a woman, like their period or the way the bra feels on them, that kind of stuff. I really worked hard not to go there with her, and just.
It was a real, seemed to me, a departure from a lot of your books, the Talk Funny Girl, and I wonder what prompted it.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, she said the Talk Funny Girl was a departure from my other books. It's a dark book, not about Revere or Buddhism or Italian Americans or any of those things I usually write about. What prompted it is just my concern for poor people and poor kids especially, and I feel they become invisible in our society, and the rural poor, which really is the majority of the poor, are especially invisible. And I like to drive around, and I've seen those people, and I just felt I wanted to give voice to them in some way.
Italians are Jews with better food, right? That's the joke. Sorry.
The details were absolutely pitch perfect, and I know that my mother, wherever her spirit is, was just sort of ready to respond and justify. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a very, very nice compliment that you gave. I mean, it probably won't surprise anyone who knows me, but that I do talk to my mother every single night at 11 o'clock. So I've had a lot of experience hearing her voice and understanding her sensibility, and well, trying as best I can to understand her sensibility and where she comes from. But you know, as Roland says, you can't rely on just people you know or people that you have direct experience with to draw a character. You know, you really do have to imagine yourself fully into them. So with all four of the characters in this book, I just really tried to get into their skin. And even though they very much resemble people in my family, I deliberately changed fundamental things about each of the characters so that I could imagine them rather than just reproduce who they were in real life, because that's not interesting to me, to just talk about, you know, describe somebody in fiction who's exactly like somebody in real life. That's not interesting to me. But so I tried really hard to make them different, but bring a core of who I knew, what I knew about them.
Go.
Could you briefly discuss the business of selling books in today's market, and particularly Tough Funny Girl, which is so good, and the number of sales of that book?
Very painful subject, I think. But important to us. You know, I published my first book 22 years ago, and the business just seems to have changed so much. I mean, Hope Mifflin published my first novel. Hope Mifflin's being eaten up by a bigger company that belongs to a bigger company. And we're dealing, you know, the individual author, really, the individual solitary human being is dealing with absolutely gigantic corporate machinery. And so my longtime editor, Shay Earhart, who I really loved and who bought The Talk Funny Girl and gave me an advance on which I could live while I was writing it, and who had been at the company, which was part of Random House Crown, Shay Earhart Books, for 20-some years, was fired, you know, because the new person came in, didn't like her. And once she was fired, I became like a persona non grata, and they hired a younger editor who they probably paid 1/4 what Shay was getting, fired her before the book came out, then put me on to a third editor, put zero money into the promotion of the book. I'm not whining, it's just the reality for, not for every single author, but for many. And I made, you know, those companies a significant amount of money. It's not like I'm losing them money. And so the book is out there, it's gotten the best response of any book I've written, and that's tremendously gratifying to me, but the sales have not been good. And so then the next book that's coming out with them, because I had a 2-book contract, I'll say, well, the sales of the last book weren't good. I don't want to sound like I'm whining, it's just, it's become a much harsher environment in my experience. I don't know if Chris has a different experience or a different take on it, but...
No, I haven't. I mean, you know, it's really tough all around, and not only because of the changes in just the way publishing companies operate and the way that they're run, and these terrible decisions that they make to get rid of the best people at the companies so that they can hire younger, cheaper people to run it. Because I mean, publishing has never made sense as a business. People who've looked, I don't know much about business, but people who've looked at the publishing industry are kind of, they've seen this kind of meltdown coming for years and years and years. It's just the publishing, just the economic model just doesn't work very well. And so with the innovations in technology, that really just completely freaked out the whole system and made it all melt down. And now they've been making really bad decisions about how to run these companies since then. And the one thing I'll say differently is that the other main change is that authors really have to do like almost 100% of their own promotion and publicity and marketing and getting on social media and all that stuff. And some of us are just not cut out for that. That's not where we want to put our energy. That's not why we got into writing. And we sort of found ourselves having to do these things that feel uncomfortable and sort of market ourselves in this way when all we want to do is go back and write our next book. I mean, that's how I feel. I love giving readings. I love meeting readers and writers, but I don't love marketing myself. And yet every publisher, whether you're a huge name or a small writer, new writer, every publisher expects you to do your own kind of marketing. And that's, I think, one of the main differences.
Absolutely the same for me. And it's like, to me, it's like, you know, you build the Ford at the plant in Detroit, you build the car, and then you're expected to drive the car to the showroom and stand there and sell it.
Exactly.
And those are they're very different skills. And you know, I just work hard not to get bitter and complain. I think I have a great life. I love what I do. And I had a mentor years ago, Michael Miller, a great poet, and he said, just concentrate on the work, just focus on the work. And I get wonderful letters from people. I meet people at events like this, and I focus on that. I try to survive economically, and I really try very, very hard not to get bitter about it.
What are your thoughts on e-books and what that's going to mean to the hard copy, which I want to remain in my life?
I'll just say really quick that you know, this came up in another conversation, and the editor from Random House who was speaking, Leah Miller, said she said ebooks are not the enemy. She said ebooks, and I agree with this. Ebooks are not the enemy. Because of ebooks, people are reading and buying actually many more books than they were before. So that in that sense, ebooks are great. They're more accessible to people. And as long as, and I don't understand the economics well enough, but as long as the author is still getting the kind of cut or whatever that we've been getting before, and it's not hurting us financially, I feel like then there's no downside to having to getting more books in the hands of more people more quickly. You know, I don't think that paper, you know, real books are going away anytime soon. I really don't. I think in fact, I think they're helping each other, you know, to help sell each other. The other question is e-publishing, which is probably not what you're asking, but that I think is a different subject, like self-publishing and doing that is a different question. But I think in general, the rise of ebooks is a good thing for readers and for writers. I don't know how you feel differently on that.
I feel the same way as long as the price doesn't get driven down to 99 cents for a book. I mean, you know, very few people make a living writing. I feel very lucky to be one of those people. Very, very few people get wealthy writing. It's really challenging from an economic standpoint, especially if you have a family. So, you know, if it gets to the point where I'm making 30 cents for a book or 80 cents, you know, 50 cents for a book, then it's just not going to be possible, you know, not for most people. So as long as that doesn't happen, and as long as people don't steal, which, you know, I occasionally get alerts on my computer that say, you know, the Talk Funny Girl available in ebook from blank blank publisher someplace. You know, you can buy it for $3.99, and they have no right to do that. I get no money from that. And those places pop up and get shut down and pop up again. But, you know, there's the protection wall is pretty flimsy. And if that stays there, we'll be fine. And I agree with Chris that it's not a bad thing in any way. It's just, I'm a little worried about what it could become.
Roland, we have to wrap up.
Okay, I think we're done. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you.